my name is Lori with housemidwife.com. Welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, thank you for joining. If you're coming back for a new video, thank you for coming back. Today we're going to talk about how you can survive natural birth, or how you can help someone else survive. And I know that sounds really negative, but if you've been through natural birth, sometimes it just feels like you're just trying to survive and get through it. And so that's the term that I'm using. Before I get started, I just want to ask you if you would, if you like this video, if you'll give me a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already, to click subscribe so you can make sure you don't miss any of my videos. Also, I have chats, live chats over on my Facebook page. So if you will go like my page over there and turn on notifications, you can actually talk to me live. It's just House Midwife, no spaces or anything. So come join us over there if you haven't already. So let's go ahead and dive right on in. With anything in life, when you're trying to be successful, one of the best things you can do to be successful is to prepare, right? So the same goes for natural birth. One of the best things you can do to be successful at natural birth is to prepare. Here are some things you can do to prepare. Obviously, read books. There's books about anything these days. And one of the best things you can do is to find a good book. I have actually written a blog and shot a video for my top 8 book recommendations. I think 5 or 6 of them are specifically about labor or having babies. The other 2 are about breastfeeding. So if you want to know my recommendations, you're welcome to go check that out. But the thing about books is you can work through them on your own time, of course, but they have good information. It's very thorough because someone has taken the time to put together all the topics that are needed for you to be successful. So that's one thing you can do to prepare. Another thing you can do that's probably even more important and probably even more effective is to take a class. I know that we live in a busy world, and so sometimes you think you don't have time to go to a class, but I guarantee you it will pay off in the long run when it comes to how successful you will be. There are so many different classes these days. Back, several years ago, maybe Lamaze might have been your only option. There's, of course, options usually at the hospital, but I would recommend if you're trying to have a natural birth that maybe you lean away from hospital-sponsored education programs, and the reason for that is because they are more often, for lack of a better term, kind of like an indoctrination to the hospital policies and protocols and routines. They're basically preparing you for how things will go there, not so much how to be successful at having a baby naturally. So you need to take a class that is geared at helping women have their babies naturally. I personally took hypnobabies when I was pregnant with my first baby, and it was a very thorough, very good program. So that's one that obviously you can take. There's also classes like hypnobabies. There's different ones locally that I won't go into because if you're not watching this where I live, it won't help you very much. But you can do some Google searches and find some good classes. And in the future, I might put together a video or a blog talking about classes that I recommend. But I do recommend you take the classes, and then I recommend that you do the exercises that are part of the class. I don't mean like workout exercises. We'll talk about that in a little while. But the activities that they give you. For example, in hypnobabies, you go through the class content when you're in the class, but then after it's over, they'll give you things to work through between that class and the next week. For that class in particular, it would be working through the scripts and listening to the tracks with your partner so that you are prepared, because you don't want to first apply the information and never have practiced it at the time of labor. It's just like maybe if you've ever played on a sports team, you don't just show up and play. You practice and you practice and you practice so that when you show up to play, it's not the first time you've ever done it. It's not so foreign to you. So just keep that in mind, that in order to be successful at applying the knowledge that you get from the classes, you do need to work through the material and make sure that you're familiar with it before labor happens. Okay. So another thing you can do to increase your odds of being able to have a successful natural childbirth and to survive it well would be to be healthy. That means many things to many people, but the 3 things that I'm going to touch on here are: 1, eat well. And that's a tough one when you're pregnant, obviously, because oftentimes you don't have a great appetite, or maybe you're sick a lot. So it's a hard one, but you have to eat as well as you're capable of, given how well you feel, And that's another thing I'll be touching on in the future, is how to deal with the nausea of pregnancy. I won't go into that now, but eat as well as you can, as healthy as you can. Try to diversify your food groups, and get lots and lots of protein so that your body is able to labor effectively. Any muscle is not going to work as well if it doesn't have the proper nutrition, doesn't have proper fuel. Think about your car. If you don't put the right amount of fuel in it, or if you don't change the oil regularly, well, if you don't put fuel in it, it's not going to run at all, right? But if you don't change the oil regularly, it might run for a while, but it's not going to run as well as it could or as efficiently as it could, and eventually it's going to stop running. So you need to keep that in mind. You want your body to be in the best shape it can be when it's time for labor, so that you can get it over with, right? And so that you can be successful at having a natural birth. You also need to exercise, and that's a hard one, especially if you already have kids, because you don't have a lot of time. But the element of exercise that's important is the endurance, not just strength, but endurance, because labor is an endurance sport. It's like a marathon. It's not a sport. That's probably not the right term, but you know what I mean. It's a marathon. It's often long and grueling, and it takes, sometimes more than a day. And that's not the kind of the activity that we usually do, is things that last that long. So you need as much endurance as you can to have a greater chance to be successful. You also need to get sleep and rest, and that's also laughable when you're pregnant, because we all know we got to pee all the time, right? You're waking up all through the night to pee. So sometimes it's a little difficult to get the rest that you need, but you need to sleep as much as you can, and get good, solid sleep, so that your body is rested and your body is ready when labor time comes. The next element is a little bit tough for people when it comes to their family and their friends, because most of us don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We're not intentionally looking to be mean, but one of the things you have to do to be successful at having a natural birth and to survive natural birth is to get all of the things out that are negative. You have to block it all out. You have to, if it's your mother-in-law who doesn't think you can do it, or your sister who thinks you're crazy for even trying, they can't be in the room. You have to have the strength to tell them no, that they can't be there, because you cannot have negative influences when you are in labor if you're wanting to do it naturally. You're psychologically, you are not able to perform as well. So much. Labor is a passive thing until, other than the pushing phase, which is a really relatively short phase. So if your body senses any kind of negativity, if it senses a threat, if it senses anxiety, it will not function as well as it could. Animals in the wild, actually, if they feel threatened, their bodies will literally shut labor down for sometimes days at a time until they feel safe, and they feel like that it's okay to bring their babies into the world. And there's a lot of that crosses over that we have in our being as well. If we feel that we're not safe, if we feel it's not a good situation, our labor process will be altered. And so if you're wanting to do it naturally, you need to make sure you minimize or completely eliminate any negativity. You have to block it all out. You have to be able to get to your happy place where you can deal with the pain of the contractions. And if you have people around you that are constantly saying, why are you even doing this? Just go to the hospital and get your epidural. Or they're saying, yeah, I told you couldn't do this. I told you weren't going to be able to do it. You're not going to, because that doubt, that self-doubt will start to kick in, and you can't have that kind of negativity. So you need to make sure you eliminate that. The next thing that is very important is to move. You have to get up and move. Being in a bed, just laying there, is not going to optimize your body's ability to work through the labor process. Your pelvis is two big bones. It has some other little bones in the back, but it's two big bones that move, okay? When you are laying still, whatever position you're in, it's just kind of locked in that position. But when you're up and moving around, the bones are wiggling and moving, and it gives the baby the opportunity to find a better way through. There are markers and different things within the pelvis that encourage the baby to turn the best way to have the easiest time to get through. And so you want to be able to move so that your bones are able to do the movements it needs to help the baby do the rotations and things like that it needs to. Unfortunately, obviously in hospitals, you're often encouraged to be in a bed. It's the worst place you can be to labor and to deliver because of that reason. In addition, your perception of pain actually increases when you're just sitting there laying still. So you'll notice sometimes if you're in labor, you might find yourself just rocking, or you might find yourself leaning over something when you're having a contraction, and you think that that just happens to be what you just happen to do. But oftentimes that's your body helping you to find a position to be in, A, to help the baby through better, but B, to help you to have a less intense perception of the pain of contractions. So you need to be up and moving as much as possible. Next is don't be induced. Now, this one's a touchy one because everybody has their story of why they were induced and why it needed to happen and this and that. I'm not talking about when it is medically indicated, meaning there is a reason that you need to get the baby out quicker. And that's a whole other topic because oftentimes that can be manipulated a little bit and used against you, but we'll talk about that another time. Right now I'm talking about when the induction is elective, or if perhaps it's not elective in that you're not choosing to do it, you're not asking for it, but maybe your provider is encouraging you to do it even though it's not necessarily needed. Okay? Body contracts stronger than it would naturally on its own, so obviously it's going to hurt worse. Okay? Different medications work different ways. That particular example was speaking to Pitocin specifically, but anytime you're augmenting or you're inducing contractions to occur, they're going to hurt worse than a natural contraction would. So obviously if you're trying to have a baby without having medications for the pain, then you don't want the contractions to hurt any worse than they have to. Okay, they're going to hurt bad enough by themselves, but you don't want to make them hurt worse. So just keep that in mind. In addition, when you are being induced, oftentimes you're going to be in a bed, and we just talked about how important it is to not be in a bed. But also, an element that often is not considered is that if you have not gone into labor yet on your own, there's a reason. What I mean by that is we don't really know why, we don't fully understand why women go into labor. Is it an element from the baby? Is it something from the mom? Is it a combination of the two? Is it a hormone? Is it a position of the baby? We don't fully understand it. We have some theories, but we don't fully understand it. So if you're not in labor yet, there's usually a reason. Oftentimes one of those reasons is the baby is just not in a good position yet. Maybe the baby's turned wrong. Or maybe the baby is the angle of the head is not optimal. Meaning maybe it's not got its head tucked yet like you really want the baby to be. Maybe it's just still kind of looking straight forward. When you start trying to make labor happen before it's time for it to naturally happen on its own, if that baby is in the wrong position, you start causing these contractions to happen, and you're squeezing that baby down and you're jamming it into your pelvis in a less than optimal position. And that makes labor harder. It makes it hurt worse. And sometimes it makes the baby get stuck to where the baby will not even fit through. And that's when you hear people that have had C-sections because maybe failure to progress, or the baby was stuck, they pushed forever and the baby just wouldn't budge. If the baby gets wedged in and contracted down before it's ready, then obviously you decrease your odds of being able to fit the baby through the right way. There's so many intricacies to labor, more than I can go into in this video, but there are, like I had mentioned, there are markers on the pelvis that cause the baby's head to turn and causes the body to turn to fit through the pelvis. It makes complete turns. The head starts one way and then it turns a complete other way as it goes through the pelvis to be able to fit through. And if it is not able to enter the pelvis correctly from the beginning, then you're going to decrease the ability of the baby to get through the way it's intended to. And it can hurt worse. If you've known anyone that has had back labor, often that is caused by a baby that's turned what's called sunny side up, or OP. It means the back of the head is pointed towards the mother's back rather than towards the mother's front, as it should be, and it causes much more pain because the head is dragging down the back of the pelvis and causing more compression on nerves and things of that nature that it wouldn't be if it was turned the other way. And so you don't want to cause labor to happen before it's ready to happen if you're trying to do things naturally. Okay, if you're trying to survive it naturally, you want things to go as easily, as smoothly, as naturally as possible, so that you don't have any hindrances or you don't have any extra speed bumps that you wouldn't normally have. Okay, Another thing that is especially important if you're going to have a hospital birth and you're trying to have a baby naturally, if you're trying to survive this naturally, is to hire a doula. Hospitals sometimes will cringe when they see a doula come in, but really the reason that they do that is because they know that that person is more focused on helping the mom succeed than adhering to hospital policies or routines. Doulas are trained in helping moms facilitate childbirth in the best way possible. They're not medically trained, they're not midwives, they're not doctors, they're not nurses, but they are rather trained in how to best support a woman as she's going through the labor process, meaning helping her come up with better positioning, or maybe helping her deal with the pain, giving her suggestions of things that she can try to help the pain. Additionally, a doula is there start to finish. It is a support person that is unwavering, and that is priceless in a labor for a mom, especially a mom that's never had a baby before, never had a baby naturally, to have that constant presence of a person to help her through. Okay, doulas really take the place of maybe moms or sisters or things like that, where in previous in previous centuries, when by the time you have a baby, you might have seen 10, 15, 20 babies born when your mom was having your brothers and sisters or things of that nature, or you went and helped whenever somebody went into labor in the neighborhood or in the village, you would always go help. And so the women all came together and had seen labor and understood labor. Well, today that's not the case. And so oftentimes you need someone that is trained to help you through that. Because maybe your mom only had that one birth and it was when you were born and it was an induction and an epidural and blah, blah, blah. Or maybe she had babies in the time of twilight sleep when she wasn't even conscious. So she doesn't really understand it at all. So having someone present that understands birth and understands labor and can help you through is priceless. You do have to pay for them, and oftentimes insurance will not cover that cost. However, I encourage you to save up and go ahead and pay that amount, because a doula is cheaper than a C-section, and research has shown that having a doula present significantly reduces your chance of ending up with a C-section, and significantly increases your chances of having a natural birth. So if your goal is to have a birth naturally and to survive it and to rock it, you need a doula there, especially in a hospital setting. The next thing I kind of touched on a little bit before, and that is your support system. You need to have people around you who believe in what you're doing and believe you are well capable of what you're trying to do. I wrote a post all about this that you can find on my blog about how important it is to have a support system and how to tell if your support system truly does support you. That they're not just giving you lip service, that they really mean that they believe in you and what you're capable of doing. So go check that out if you haven't already. And again, don't allow anyone present into your labor who is not totally on board with your plan. The next point is to reduce anxiety and anticipation. And the reason that is so important is because when you're anxious and you're worried and you're anticipating in a negative way everything that happens, you alter your body's ability to labor naturally and to do what it's meant to do. If you're worried that every pain is something wrong, or you're worried that maybe that your provider's not supporting you or things of that nature, or you're worried that you're not ready for this or anything like that, that all can alter the natural process. And this point specifically can be greatly reduced, or the anxiety can be greatly reduced by doing the first thing I mentioned, which is just prepare. Do all you can do to be well prepared for labor, and then you won't have as much to be nervous about and be anxious about, because you will trust the process and you will know that pain doesn't mean something's wrong necessarily. Pain is part of the process, and you will just know to work with it rather than fight it. You must, the next point is you must hire someone you trust. Oftentimes people just think that if you have an obstetrician or you have a midwife that you're good, you've done what you need to do, right? Well, no, that's not all you need to do. You need to interview your provider. You need to know that you like them, that they trust your decision making, that they believe in what you're trying to do. There's a whole host of things that you need to consider, and I will be making a post about that soon, about questions to ask your provider when you're interviewing them before you hire them for your labor. You need to trust them. You need to know, do they have successful moms having natural births? Not just do they have one or two that accidentally happened because they got to the hospital too late, but do they have moms that go through the labor process with them and succeed at natural birth? What are their percentages? What are their statistics? What's their C-section rate? What's their primary C-section rate, even more importantly, meaning how many moms that they take care of have their very first C-section with them. Some providers have as high as a 50% C-section rate. That is not a provider you want to see if you're trying to survive a natural birth and to succeed at natural birth. So you need to take all these things into consideration and be looking for that post that I'll be doing soon about that, so that you will be able to ask the right questions when you're interviewing. And you need to interview. Any provider that's worth their weight will allow you to have a free meet and greet visit with them, meaning you go, you sit down, you talk to them, you ask your questions, and they will answer your questions. If a provider will not do that for you, you need to be aware. That needs to be a big red flag, because they are probably not interviewing and not allowing that to happen for a reason. The next point as we wrap this up is to trust your body. You must trust that your body was made for this. You as a woman were made to bear children. Your anatomy is specifically designed in a way that you can allow a baby out once it's made. Everything is designed perfectly for that. And if you do the right things to work with your body rather than against it, or to enhance the process rather than, again, work against it, that you will be successful. And you have to trust that, and you have to know that, because if you're doubting yourself, then that's not a good start. It's not that it makes it impossible, but it's certainly not a good start. So you need to be prepared and know that you're made for this and you can do this. And you have to decide that you can, and you have to have a plan for how you're going to do it. I'm not necessarily in this point talking about a birth plan, meaning a written birth plan. I'm talking about a plan for how, once labor starts, this is what I'm going to do. If this happens, if I start hurting and but I know I'm not in active labor yet, I'm going to maybe have a warm bath, or I'm going to eat this, or I'm going to call this person, or I'm going to watch this movie or listen to this music. Things that you're going to plan to do to work your way into it without focusing on it too soon. You need to have a plan for, once the pain really hits, how are you going to deal with it? And that comes a lot of times from the classes that you take, the plan that you will put in place to succeed. Because obviously you've heard the phrase before, those who fail to plan to fail. And that's often the case for labor. And while I know that women have been having babies for generations and generations and generations since the beginning of time, and they haven't done all these steps, we live in a time that works against you. If you're trying to do things naturally, it might make fun of you. It might look down its nose at you. You just don't have the support that you should have. And it's not expected that having a baby naturally is something that's going to happen. That is not an assumption that most people will make. So you need to have done the best you can to plan for it, and to have the resources around you to help you succeed. So, do you have what it takes? Yes, you do. You know you do. If you're watching this video and you've gotten to this point, you know that you do. And so, if you will take the steps that I've given you and put them into place to help you prepare, you will succeed, or you'll have a really great chance of succeeding. There are sometimes elements that are beyond your control, but the thing about preparing and putting these steps into place is that if for some reason you end up with a C-section, you've done all you can do to succeed and to survive your natural childbirth. If you're not the one having the baby, obviously I can't speak in every pronoun and things like that to where it's tailored to you, but you know that these points you can use to talk to your friends and family about, and you know that these points are important so that when your daughter or your friend or your sister is in labor, you will know the things that they need from you, such as the support, for instance, or the preparation, or maybe the gifts you can give them is the books to help them prepare. You can pay for their classes. These are all things that you can do to help them survive their natural childbirth and to be successful. So I hope that these points have been useful to you. I hope that you've been able to apply them If you have questions, I want to hear them. I want to hear from you. If these points have worked for you, or if you have other suggestions, I want you to comment below. Let me know. I love to hear from you. And again, if you haven't already, please do subscribe so that you don't miss any videos in the future. I'm going to be making lots more. This is just the beginning. So make sure you subscribe, and I'll try to put a little button on here somewhere. But if I'm not able to, as I'm learning how to use those functions, then just subscribe below, hit that big red button. And again, if you've learned from this, please give me a big thumbs up down there. And one final mention that I do have the coffee talks on Facebook, and I would love for you to join me. They're lots of fun, and I talk about all kinds of different topics. So check that out, facebook.com/housemidwife. And I will see you next time on my next video. Bye.